All right. I promised to get you out of here by 8:30. And if I don't stop at 8:30, you got my permission just to get up and leave. And not that you need my permission to come or go, but I know how it feels to work hard all week and get to Friday and have extra things to do, and especially when you get seated and still and somebody is going on and on and on. You think, I'm going to doze off here. Say that again. Let me say what I said again. Let me repeat this. Somebody needs to hear this. I said, when you work hard all week and it's Friday and you have extra things scheduled and you come and you get seated and somebody goes on and on and on, and they said they were used to that. Oh, me. All right, since these are the major issues, I'm not saying these are all the issues, but these are kind of the umbrella issues that come before me. And you know, I've been doing this for a lot of years, and so I just kind of make notes where the issue's coming from, and it becomes then my responsibility to make sure I educate myself scripturally and every way I can to help people address those concerns. I can't just say, well, stop doing that, or here's what you ought to do. It's not up to me to tell them what to do. It's up to me to get them to resources where they can learn what to do and then make those kind of decisions themselves. And so we'll talk about those kind of things this weekend, and we're going to start this evening by talking about the communications. And this is I thought was pretty telling for our day and age, with a little humor. What do you mean I don't communicate? I sent you an email on Monday. You know, that's humorous to us, but that's almost true with some relationships. You know, they communicate from a distance. They send messages in different ways at different times, and the other person's supposed to pick it up, even though it may not be regular, it may not be consistent, it may not be in the form that person's expecting, but there it is. It's out there. I've done my part. That's all I have to do. So, I'll let you help me define what communication is. If you could put into one sentence your definition of communication, it'd be what? Ah, good point. Sending and receiving, otherwise it's just broadcasting. Good point. Excellent point. Somebody else? All right. So that's the receiving part, listening. All right. Do what? All right. Those containing our thoughts. Conveying our thoughts, okay. Anybody else? Say that again. All right, exchanging ideas. So we kind of stayed where we started, and that is that there's something that has to be sent out, and there's something that has to be received, but there's even more involved than that. Those things are containing our ideas, you know, what we'd like to express, and somebody's got to take those in, but there has to be a processing of that. You know, you can receive it. You know, I can send James an email. You know, I sent it. It shows up in James's box. He can't open it. He sees it's from me. His computer received it. Doesn't process it. Doesn't break it down. Doesn't expose it so he can see exactly what I intended to communicate. Does that happen electronically? Yeah. Does that happen emotionally sometimes? Absolutely it can. You know, we can have our thoughts all formulated, In fact, they can be so formulated, if the other person's talking, we're formulating thoughts. We're not listening to what that person's saying. Somebody said, you know, it's listening. It is. To what? What's being said? Well, it's hard to do that if you're formulating your thoughts. That person's expressing theirs. If you're listening, you take it in, you process it. Now, if you process it, you ought to be able to respond to it. Yes, sir. All right, exactly right.
Some understanding.
That's right.
Of the reception.
That's right.
Both parts.
Absolutely. That's exactly right. There has to be some understanding and some feedback on both parts, he said. Or else you haven't communicated. So it's important. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, okay. That's right. And sometimes that's exactly right. You know, where we might think we're communicating one thing because we have processed it, we have formulated it, but it's not received that way at all. Maybe because of a facial expression, maybe because of a tone of voice, maybe because of selection of words that that person has a different definition for. I have a meaning for it. That's why I ask you, what do you mean by communication? If you and I don't agree on that, and I spend 30 minutes talking to you about communication, we haven't communicated. We have to kind of agree on a definition. And those things become absolutely essential. God communicated exactly what He wanted Adam and Eve to know. He programmed them with what He wanted to know. He made them fully knowledgeable that all these things were created for their good. They understood that. There was no outside forces or voices that had other definitions, other influences. And so we don't have that luxury. You know, we kind of start with all kinds of definitions of things, don't we? And you and I have to kind of break that down. If we're going to have, number one, the relationship to God, we ought to, and relationship with each other, we ought to. So you've given me some really good insight about your experience with communication and what your definition is. I used to put on the, when we lived in Colorado, I taught at a community college. And one of the courses I taught was speech communication. And of course, these are freshman and sophomore folks. And so a lot of athletes in there. You know, they came to community college, they played basketball and baseball, things like that. And they were forever wanting extra credit. And I thought, well, just get the credit that I've assigned and you'll make an A. If you get all the credit of the assignments I've given you, you'll have an A. But I don't, you know, I'm traveling and sometimes I have time to study and I don't like to read. And, you know, you got anything I can do for extra credit? So I just built in little quotes that if they remembered them, I'd give them extra credit. So one of the things, I'd go up to the board and I'd write the word communication. And that's back when we still had chalkboards, you know, and I'd say, I'll give you 2 points to use anywhere this semester if you'll come up here and circle the 2 most important letters in the word communication. And most of them would always go up there and circle you and I, you know. And that, you know, that makes sense. And people would guess, you know, if they kind of look at my facial expression and I look like maybe that wasn't it, they'd try to circle other ones. They got real creative. But you see, as you have expressed in your definition, you haven't communicated until the other person can say, ah, I see. I see what you're talking about. Now I know. Now I understand. It doesn't mean that you have to agree. It just means that you have to have received what they intended for you to receive, to have understood it the way they communicated it. That becomes important. You have not communicated until that happens, until the other person really has understood what you sent their way. They processed it, when Denise and I first married, and we came from different backgrounds, and she had an intact family and very structured environment, and so very clear roles and things like that. Mine's a little confused, but since I didn't grow up with my father being in the home all the time, I was determined that I was going to be the right kind of husband. And I was determined that I was going to be the right kind of father, and so I just couldn't be right. I couldn't be wrong to do that. And so if we got crossed up, I would try to explain to her, communicate with her, why I made the decision I made or why we need to make this decision that I thought we ought to make. And I thought we always agreed. I mean, I really did. I mean, we'd talk about it, and she'd say, okay, all right, you're right. And I thought, you know, I'm getting this right. And finally, we just kind of got to the point where one day she said, no, I don't agree with that. And I said, we've already talked about that. Yes, we do. We agree on that. I said, no, I don't. I said, well, you said. She said, I wanted to go to sleep. She said, you want to have these talks at night, and I'm tired. And you just kept on and on and on. I'm thinking, okay, you know, he's not asking. And some of you said, you know, this receiving and exchange of information, you process it, you want some feedback. Well, I wasn't waiting for feedback. I mean, I was right to start with. I don't want any feedback. I want her to know why we needed to do this. Because you see, as the husband, I'm supposed to make good decisions, and I got to make sure that our marriage stays intact. And I've already thought about this, and it's for our good. And she'd say, okay, but she just wanted to go to sleep. Well, tell them what you said. Okay, you see there, I didn't communicate that right. When I told you, she said, okay. She said, I didn't say, okay. She said, okay. You know, there's a difference in this. There's something different communicated when those expressions are made. And that's exactly the point. Now, I didn't take that okay as sarcastic then. I took it sarcastic tonight. That was very sarcastic tonight. I didn't take that as sarcastic during those times. I thought, okay, she understands. Whew, I'm getting good at this. I wasn't good at that. You know, I was just lecturing her, and that's how she described it. You just lecture me. We don't have a conversation. You just lecture me. Sure, there's no feedback. Feedback can say, well, what if we do that? Can we afford it? How's that going to affect the kids? Do we have to move? I mean, there are a lot of considerations, isn't there, when we try to decide something. Well, but if I take this job, you know, I'm going to make more money. That's a consideration. You might need to make more money. It might be a good move. But it might be that the feedback is, you know, the kids are kind of crucial grades in school. They got all their friends here. Boy, the church is strong here. There might be some other feedback, don't you think, in that context? And so when we're talking about communication, we need to really make sure we understand what it is. And that when that person is speaking, that we really are listening. We started with the definition. You know, this giving and receiving. And so if a person is giving information to us, we have to be busy receiving it. Now once we receive it, we have to process it. And it may be that we're not able to process it at that moment. Here's what I've learned over the years is that I'm not always prepared to respond to a person who really feels passionate about something. Because here's what I've learned is that if they're all worked up over it, they have a lot of passion about it, they spend a lot of time thinking about it. And sometimes I'm hearing it for the very first time. I'm not that passionate about it because I haven't heard it before. I didn't know they felt that way. And boy, in the church we have some of those relationships, don't we? Not just in marriage, but sometimes in the church somebody will come to us and we've said or done something that's offended them or bothered them or hurt them, and they really are hurt. And they really are emotional about that hurt. And too often we start saying, no, that's not true. And we don't listen. If we listen to all of it, the safe thing to say is, okay, I heard you. Can I have some time to think about that? That's my first time hearing it, and you obviously have been thinking about that. Don't say, you've obviously had made up your mind Be careful how you respond. If you're going to give the feedback, the safe thing is to say, let me give that some thought. Can we talk again? That's a whole different response, isn't it? You received everything they said. You obviously know that they have great, it may be that you have the same answer, but they know that you've processed it. You've taken the time to digest it all. You didn't respond immediately. If you do, they're going to say, see, I knew you'd have that attitude. You didn't hear anything I said. In order for me to hear what they said, I've got to spend some time processing it, just like they spent some time formulating. You said your thoughts. That, in a relationship, is a powerful thing. Too often, with Denise and I in our early marriage, you know, we were formulating our response while that person was finishing their communication. They'd already thought about it and they're trying to say something here, and I'm thinking, okay, you just wait. You think you have something on me. You wait to hear what I've got on you, and I'm not hearing what they're saying at all. And when that happens enough, no wonder they come into a counseling situation and say, we just don't communicate. They're right. They don't have a healthy plan giving and receiving information. And they sure don't process it, break it down. They never open that file. They've had something that causes that particular file that's been communicated to them, that information that's been sent to them, they can't open it. Either they've been hurt before, and so they're not going to open that file again because they're not going to be hurt like that again, and so they just can't open it. Their computer's been updated, and you're using an old format. I'm not going to open that file. We're not going to communicate that way. Well, if you don't communicate, that is, if you don't give and receive and process information, you haven't communicated. Now keep in mind, I'm not saying you always have to agree. Denise and I don't always agree. But we work really, really hard at making sure we understand and that we respect what the person said. And there are times when things are sensitive. And when they become sensitive, we make sure that we don't talk about that in detail right then. We get permission to say, can we talk about that? I heard you. Can we talk about that later? That gives us some time to function like we need to in that context. So you have described in your definition, what the function of communication is. That it is the sending of information to someone or something that needs to be processed, and I think somebody used the word, otherwise it's just broadcast. Just send out there and hope somebody pick it up somewhere, repeat it, kind of like on the internet. Shoot it out there, I don't care who received it, not anybody in particular, but everybody maybe can be influenced by it. That's not really communication. So in that process, there's a function to it. Ideally, it is to think through what it is you want other people to know about you, feel about you, do in response to you, and you verbalize that in a way that they can really know who you are, what it is you need or you want. What happens when a baby cries? It gets kind of a response, doesn't it? Doesn't have words. Is it hungry? Has it soiled itself? We start going through this process. Okay, it's not feeding time. Okay, I check their diaper. We go through all this process. We know they're trying to communicate something. It's kind of built in. There's a process to that. The function is to get that, I have a need. That baby's saying, I have a need. So somebody responds to that communication, to that information, and hopefully can fill that need. And husbands and wives, that ought to be a healthy function of it, to say, this is how I feel, this is how I'm responding to how I've been treated, this is what I need. And then that person say, in response, after they had time to think about it, process it, put their thoughts together and say, no, I've already fed the baby. already done these things, as husband and wife, say, okay, I did hear you say that. Got a little distracted here. You did ask me to do it. I did say I would do it. I apologize for not having done that. I'll try to make it a point from now on. If I'm not going to have time to do it, I won't promise to do it. Rather than saying, well, you don't understand what my day's been like. Just process it. If that person said, did I ask you to do that? Yes, you did. Did you say you could? Yes, I did. But you didn't do it. No, I didn't. Not going to understand why. That'd be bothersome to you. Roles were reversed, I'd probably feel the same way. I'll pay closer attention next time. Now, the person who sent the message, who got the feedback, shouldn't say, no, I won't ask you again. I asked you that time, you said you would, you didn't, and now you just admitted you didn't, not going to ask you again. That's not the point of communication. In that process, you can kind of break that down and say, okay, I didn't handle that right. I can do that better. And what we want to do is build up some competency. And the only way to build up competency in anything is to what? Do it. Practice listening. When you just feel your lips forming a response and that person's still talking, force that back down and say, Nod your head. Okay. Force yourself to listen. When you do, it's amazing what you learn. Force yourself to see how passionate they might be about that. And acknowledge that. Say, wow, you're really passionate about that. I can see that. They know that you not only verbally heard them, but you see that they are concerned about that. That builds up some understanding, which is competency. That builds up an ability to respond and see what your response ignites in the other person. That builds up your competency. You want to be competent in everything you do. And then the attitude. And again, we express that, and Denise just illustrated for us that there was an attitude in her answer saying, okay. She was really saying, I'm tired, please stop. I didn't hear that. I wasn't competent enough to think, she's frustrated. I was thinking, okay, you keep at it long enough, they'll get it. I wasn't competent at it. I didn't see that result because I wasn't looking for anything but agreement. I never paused and said, what do you think about it? I just kept on until she said, okay, sure, we can do that. Okay, sure, we can do that. Whatever the response is, I missed that. So we want to have the right kind of attitude and say, I really do want to know what you've said. I've found that in church settings, I know we're out of time, so I'm not going to, this is going to be your assignment. James, if you and Carlos would pass out those. What I want you to do tonight is go home, and this is front and back, is answer this little questionnaire. And there's a book by Gary Chapman that is called The 5 Love Languages. And he's not a member of the church, but he has real biblical principles. But he emphasized some things, and this is what I want to take home with you. Denise and I had been married a long while before we read the book, but he says that there's 5 prominent ways that we communicate because of how we were influenced growing up. And he talks about words of affirmation. Some people like to be reaffirmed. They like for people to brag on them, tell them how beautiful they are, what a good job they're doing, they're a great cook. They like those words of affirmation to say, you're doing a good job. Others just want you to spend time with them. They want you to be present, enjoy being in their presence. And they don't want you to always be working or busy helping other folks. They want you to make some time just for them. Then other people like receiving gifts. Doesn't have to be expensive gifts. They just want you to know, hey, I thought about you. I purchased this for you. That's their language. That's what lets them know that you care about them. Then there are other people who acts of service. And that is, they do good things for folks because it means something to them when people do things for them. That's their language. That's how they communicate. And others are physical touch. You know, they like holding hands, they like hugging people's necks, they like to embrace, and they kind of feel like, okay, this person cares about me, this is a loving family, when you have that physical contact. And so I want you to take the test. Don't look at your spouse's, you know, how do you answer that one? Not anybody's answer but yours. So we may have an extra one. If your spouse is not with you, you want to share it with them, then you can do that just for your communication. Let me give you one story, and we'll close for tonight. You see, I'm one of 11 kids, and so in my family, if the chores weren't done, it got really chaotic. I mean, dishes and everything was just multiplied. And so if you didn't do things repetitiously to get all the chores done, I mean, it just didn't work very well. And so I'm growing up, and when people are all doing their chores, everything was lovely. And so Denise and I married. If I get home from work and there are dishes in the sink, then I might go wash the dishes. This is what needs to be done. There are dishes in the sink. You don't leave dishes in the sink. You're not going to have dishes for the meal. 11 kids, you don't have extra dishes. And so I'm just washing dishes and doing these little things, and she gets colder and more irritated, and I'm thinking, what woman wouldn't want a man like me? I mean, how many men come home, wash dishes, and clean the bathrooms, and she doesn't care. And see, while we're dating, I'm telling her how beautiful her brown eyes are, and she's the smartest woman I know, and all those things are still true. Her eyes are still brown. She's still the smartest woman I know. She married me. So she's still the smartest woman I know. And so, but I didn't say that so often. Her language was words of affirmation. And I wasn't saying that as often. My language is acts of service. And so I think I'm saying when I'm washing dishes, I love you. You know what she said? One day she said, why do you do that? How did you say it? Why do you do that? I said, do what? Washing the dishes. And I said, because they need to be washed. You think I'm a nasty housekeeper? I said, well, no. Well, why are you doing my job? And I said, well, I didn't know I was doing your job. We both ate off the dishes, didn't we? It was irritating her. I thought I was communicating loud and clear. I love you. And she was hearing, somebody mentioned that a while ago, she was hearing, you are a lousy housekeeper. I have to wash your dishes. You know, I have to mop the floors. I wasn't thinking that at all. Whoever was available in a family of 11 and something needed to be done, you better do it because you were available. And the family's going to function well when that's the case. So that's what I want you to have in mind when you're answering these questions. You're right.
The dad had a job, the mom had a job, so that's why I thought that.
Leave my job alone. You know, I'm going to be out of a job. So, and that's right. You know, and what was being neglected was she had beautiful brown eyes. You're a good cook. Boy, you keep a nice house. You know, those things were being neglected. Had I said those things, because all those things were true, that's her language. She would have understood it. She knew I loved her. I appreciated what she's doing. What I thought was communicating love wasn't doing it. So you can see even good intentions can be misread because the sending of that message never was processed, never was open in the context that you intended for it to be. So when you answer these questions, your first impulse is going to be your right answer. If you start saying, I wonder how my wife think I'd answer that. I wonder how other guys in the congregation are going to answer that. You're going to answer it wrong. That's not going to be your language. It's going to be theirs. And so your first impulse, just answer it. And we'll start there in the morning. Yeah. That's exactly right. There's two choices on each of those questions, so you pick the one that fits you the best. Doesn't mean the other one's wrong. It just means that's your first impulse. That's how I would answer it. That kind of gives you the prominence of your love language. And then we'll come back tomorrow and we'll start our day talking about that. Just what you found out, whether it's insightful to you or not, and then how we use that. Once we know what our language is, what our our spouse's language is, you know, how do we use that advantageously to enhance our relationship? Fair enough? Yeah, if you've done it before, do it again. And Denise and I have changed over since our kids have grown and gone. You know, our priorities somewhat of what we brings us happiness and joy. We'll talk about that tomorrow and kind of tell you what ours has done. We still have the same tendencies, but there's some other things that have risen in importance to us just because of the context of life. And so if you've taken it before, take it again. Just see if you're still there. All right, let's have a word of prayer. Righteous Father, we are delighted to have this time together this evening talking about things that are so important, not only to us, but important unto Thee. We recognize that Thy design and Thy purpose was that we not only be created in Thy image, but that we have all the happiness and joy that Thou hast designed for us to have as individuals and as couples and as families and as a spiritual family, the church. We're grateful for every person represented here. We pray that Thou would dismiss us in Thy care and Thy keeping and return us tomorrow so we can continue to look at things that we can do to learn more about Thy design and Thy purpose for our relationships and honor Thee in all that we do. And we ask this in Christ Jesus' name. Amen.